This is Natural Time, and I'm Lisa Starr. It's Mayan astrology for a modern age and a video form of the podcast I host 3 times a week. This is the weekend edition, and it is geared towards beginners. That was a decision I made pretty recently. I just want people who haven't followed the calendar to find this video and feel they can pick up right where we are. And so I'm going to just return to a more grade school approach. But I almost always launch into some kind of trippy, cosmic overemphasis on the grand scheme. So I think it can still be interesting, even if you've been with my work or with the Mayan calendars for a while. So I am only talking here about the Tzolk'in calendar, which is the 260-day spiritual calendar of the ancient Maya, and it's based on gestation in the womb. It is just shy of 9 months, and so is gestation in the womb. When we say 9 months, we're always counting back to the menstrual part of a woman's cycle, but in fact, conception happens during ovulation. So we're adding time in a way to the count of 9 months. And so if we took away the time between a woman's menstruation and when she ovulated, the moment that she conceived her child, we would be down to around 260 days. So this is for real. I think this is why the Maya chose to make this calendar central to their spiritual discipline and practice. So we're currently in a 13-day cycle within the calendar. The calendar is 20 sets of 13-day cycles, and they are called wave spells. So there are 20 different wave spells in the 260-day calendar, and we are in the one celebrating the Mayan totem of white mirror. It's called white mirror. Now, to be clear, the ancient Maya used their language, and this is all anglicized, and in a way it was brought into the modern times through a New Age bent. Jose Arguelles was a very gifted anthropological professor, and he taught, and he was also Mexican American in his ancestry, and he brought the Mayan teachings to this access point. I am a student of his in concept. I never knew him, but everything I talk about is coming from his lineage. And then there were ways that I did a little more research and came up with alternate ways to express the time we passed through, but I'm very devoted to his original bridge that he created between a much distant and colonized and eradicated past when the Maya had this incredible supremacy in Central America. They were not like the Native Americans as we might experience them in North America, who were pretty nomadic. The Maya and Aztec civilizations, they created pyramids and roadways that were like a combination of ancient Egypt and ancient Rome. They had so much powerful technology for the time, and they also, they created pyramids without any pack animals, meaning horses or burros or oxen. They somehow moved giant slabs of stone and piled them up to make pyramids as tall as mountains. Without that, clearly they used human beings, so that's a little suspect or inhumane, but nonetheless, they were really incredible. And I'm talking about the pyramids a little today as a reference point because basically the white mirror wave spell that we're in, the 13 days that we're celebrating right now, is really strongly oriented to the pyramid itself. If you look at the hieroglyph, the drawing of this white mirror tribe or day sign, it is as if we were flying above the pyramid looking down, and you can see the staircases made out of stone blocks that were the access points on all 4 sides of the ancient pyramids. And you can be reminded that the top of the pyramid, which not only looked out over the entire landscape and created a mountain out of stone, it also looked up into the sky. So it was this axis point between Earth and the heavens. And at the very top, there was a place in order to have a ritual human sacrifice. So white mirror is a bit of a, I can't remember the term, but it's a little whitewashing of what was happening in this wave spell. And when the Maya chose this totem, they were choosing a totem to recognize stone in general, and then the obsidian that was used to make the blade of a little handheld obelisk that you could carve out a human heart with one blow. And that's sort of the gesture, is you're holding this small stone, hand-sized, palm-sized blade made out of stone, carved, and then you swipe through a human body, extracting through the rib cage that shattered a heart, and you cut it out and you hold it up as evidence that this act of sacrifice has happened, which is a huge reason why Mayan spirituality isn't accessible to modern people, be they New Age or of Central American origin. We're not gratifying the Central America Mexican history like we're doing another kind of eradication or colonization even of their spirituality, because Catholicism has taken over the area, which was brought by the Spanish and is part of the colonial influence. And the point was to take pagans or heathens and Christianize them. So Catholicism is really strong, if kind of mystical, in Central and South America, but the Maya originally were gifted pagans who were following lunar calendars and spiritual calendars based on gestation, and they were following the stars really acutely with great insight, and they were following 20 totems from their world, and they were following them in a certain order that allowed them to have this penultimate moment, a triumphant human sacrifice ceremony that was an offering to the gods as well as an access portal to the gods, so that when you die through sacrifice, you can basically enter heaven yourself. And I think this is my point, is that we're not talking about this there are not a lot of us talking about Mayan spirituality with much reverence, because there is so much to overcome when it comes to recognizing them as being really proficient and having this great prevalence of human sacrifice. It was frequent. At minimum every 20 days, which is what the calendar articulates. Every 20 days is a white mirror day. Every 20 days is a day where ostensibly we would have a human sacrifice ritual. So anyway, that's the background. It's always interesting to me. And Jose Arguelles' choice to not call it obsidian, or reference what the background was, the backstory of this totem, that's interesting, but wasn't enough for me. Once I recognized what it was actually originally about, I felt like it needed to be brought in. And whenever I talk about white mirror, that's kind of my go-to. Hey, everyone, tread lightly and be patient with yourself, because we're moving through time that resembles or recognizes the human sacrifice ritual, and we have to sort of revisit what that was. When I was first studying the calendar, I didn't know that, and so, like you, perhaps, until I just, spoiler alert, I just outed the ancient history of it. But before that, I'm like, white mirror, it's a time of reflection, not so much like pensive reflection, but of actually finding yourself mirrored in situations and people that you run into or stand before in the time of white mirror. And that there is a way that mirroring creates another word Jose Arguelles chose, which is endlessness. And endlessness to me is sort of like when you have if you have a mirror facing a mirror, there's this crazy like Brechtian or Can't remember who was the illustrator, where everything was at odd angles, but like an optical illusion of a kind. Like, oh, this is an endless reflection, because the reflection in the reflection is like you can't ever see the end of reflecting. And so I think that's kind of the cosmic part of White Mirror, is that when you step into this time, whether you're thinking about the human sacrifice part or just mirrors, you can grasp the vibe. The vibe is something uncanny and mystical and inexplicable and otherworldly. I think otherworldly and mystical are two really strong words for this time, because it takes us out of everyday living. It's rarefied. That's another one I lean on. It's rarefied. This time is a ritual of some kind, and there is often a tearing away of the ego or attachment, and yet there is something totally sacred. The word sacrifice holds sacred within it. There's something so sacred if you allow yourself to join with this moment of living outside the box, outside everyday occurrences. On some level, for 13 days, divinity is organizing for us that we're in an altered state, and not like high, more like adrenaline. That's another one that I say often about this. When you are either the priest cutting out the heart of someone, or the person whose heart is about to be cut out, or the people watching from down below, there's adrenaline rushing through us as we face like the trespass or the irregularity of ending human life with a crowd, as a ceremony, not in a defense posture or not even in a strange aggression, but an organized ritual where death is involved. That's odd and creates adrenaline, which in another way creates an altered state. When you're not relaxed, you're heightened. It's like a different kind of plant spirit medicine. Usually we have a white mirror day. I'm talking about a 13-day stretch that's all in honor of and has the characteristics of white mirror. And so far we're on day 4. We're on the 4th day of 13, and I'm enjoying actually having a moment where I feel a bit more timeless, or that society or even some of my human relationships are, interwoven with this quality again of mysticism or just an altered state. I personally went through a ton in the last 2 wave spells, the last 2 13-day cycles. One was yellow human, honoring the yellow human, and then red serpent, honoring the snake and all reptiles. And I had a lot of like confrontational inner work that kind of broke out of me like a breaching whale, just like, not just a wave, but almost like a rocket level explosion from within, and putting myself in part back together, but also just understanding the necessity sometimes of breakage. I'll explain it this way. Like, I was already broken and maybe put back together in a shape that wasn't my original shape. So someone was trying to help, or I was trying to help and heal myself over my lifetime, but it wasn't how I was originally when I was whole. And so when I broke apart pretty recently in a drastic way, I could feel it. Like, I just am becoming undone. I felt like this time I had some authority and positive assistance or expertise in putting myself back together the right way, the way that I originally am intended to be. So I'm mentioning that just because it's frequent, and common for people moving through the calendar in consciousness to go through some of the wave spells, the 13-day cycles that we've been through recently, and have it be a kind of reckoning or a time that encompassed both suffering and awakening. We started with Red Skywalker, and that was, 65 days ago. So 2 months ago in the Gregorian calendar, we started with Red Skywalker, which explores like, being high, being disassociated, and exploring what life is like when we're not just like contained in a human form. And then we had White World Bridger, which was about death. And for me, there were 3 deaths in my community that I could observe, like very close at hand, and the emotions around loss. And then there was Blue Storm, the wave spell of, a tremendous force of nature coming through and, shaking us to our core and getting rid of excess, just like the transformation that a storm represents. And then we had Yellow Human, where we're actually confined to our human bodies and our human karma, and it's rough. Like our human karma is at reckoning. And then Red Serpent, which is, interesting and intriguing and has a lot of positive simplicity. A reptile doesn't have like a warm beating heart. A reptile doesn't, it's not as relational. A snake doesn't have any like claws or ways to protect itself. It only has its snake bite and its, fast moving, slithering and hiding places. It can't like build a shelter. It has to rely on like very keen awareness of danger, and is often over stimulated by safety issues. So going through Red Serpent is a quest to find out whether we're safe or not, and if we're not, what do we have to heal or change. And then that brings us to now White Mirror, which I think is just time to be maybe a more public or shared view of a lot of the ego deaths that have already occurred, where we are maybe more unified and not isolated. And there's something powerful and inevitable about a ceremony like a human sacrifice, meaning it's just not a time that you can be light about sort of what it takes to actually break down the boundaries of between ourselves and like something great and vast beyond, and how our ego, even though it's a necessity for every human incarnation, can be overamped and needs a wave spell, a 13-day cycle like this to be, I guess, just in some way trimmed back and diminished, that our ego is diminished through the White Mirror time. But like I said, I've been through a lot of ego shattering for several cycles, so I'm not sure what's coming. I'll let you know in a week when we reconvene. But currently, I personally am feeling like, well, I've done a lot of heavy lifting here, and right now, the best part of White Mirror to me is when you feel like you match the person you're sitting with, that you have commonality, and that what you want to talk about is something you both have experienced. It's like a natural / extraordinarily spiritual approach to White Mirror, or the gift of White Mirror, which is just like, yeah, you're like me and I'm like you. That's really reassuring. I'm not alone in this. I said on my regular podcast this week that it's kind of famously known that when you have an infant, you want to, when they start being able to see you, like they can focus on your face, that's right when you start imitating what they're doing. So if they make faces, you make faces, because they can feel and sense that is totally reassuring and connective. Like what I'm doing is being seen, and I'm being joined, and that is so healthy for a human soul. So I think the White Mirror wave spell offers us some of those same gifts and lessons. And you don't have to do anything. Like, please, just hang on. Don't try to make a White Mirror experience. Just allow yourself to be patient with what the experience you're being given is. And the endlessness is kind of, it's funny, like the irony is that like if it's going really well, that feels endless. If it's not going very well, that feels endless. I don't know if there's any way around it. But if you get stuck and feel it's too much, or you need more guidance, I'm available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on all the major podcast platforms. It's called Natural Time. I'll be back on the video screen next week. I am Lisa Starr. I am another yourself, and in Mayan we say, in Lakesh.